I'm going to push play on Facebook Live. Okay. Welcome, everybody. Baruch Hashem. We are starting our journey this evening with Avram's journey with Lech Lecha. Very important parsha. There's a lot to uncover in this parsha. A lot of interesting topics to discuss. Obviously, in an hour we can't get to everything, but we'd like to start with a brief synopsis of what happens in the parsha. So, the very beginning of the parsha is a communication between Avraham, H-Shem, and Avram. Avram is basically an unknown at this point. We had a quick mention of him at the end of Noach, but we don't know almost anything about him besides that his father traveled all over the place with him, and then he's married. He has a wife, Sarai. That's all we know. And this parsha begins. Hashem commands Avram to travel, to go follow him, and he does. And we'll see all the issues of age and everything that comes up. But he brings with him his nephew Lot, and there's a lot to discuss there. But I don't think we'll have time tonight to get into it. But Lot is in his in Avram's travels, he finally gets to the Holy Land, to what's then Canaan, and there is a famine in the land, and he's forced to go to Mitzrayim, where his wife is abducted by Paro's men. Paro's house is basically cursed, and then Avram takes her back, and there's a lot to discuss there as well. We'll see how much we can get through there. Anyway, there's a giant world war that happens in this week's parsha. 5 kings against 4 kings. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought I heard something. Let's try to mute our microphones if possible. Let's see if I can do that from here. Let's mute and mute. Okay, good. You can unmute yourselves as needed. If you have any questions later on, for sure, please do. Or comments are also welcome. So after Avraham participates in this war, mostly because to save his nephew Lot, who had moved away from him because of a fight between the two camps, his shepherds and Lot's shepherds, and eventually Avram is then forced to rescue him, which he does very well, and he's promised rewards, but he refuses them. But the king of what's then called Shalem, Malkitzedek, that Chazal tell us is Shem, and the son of Noach. So he comes out and he blesses Avram, and he gives him a gift, which we'll talk about later on. Sarai is not able to have children, and she has a handmaid by the name of Hagar, that again Chazal tell us was actually the daughter of Paro, and she went with the Jewish people because she realized that it's better to be a handmaid to Avram than a princess of the giant, powerful nation of Mitzrayim. We'll talk about Sarai's treatment of Hagar, and last but not least, we'll touch on a very complicated issue of the covenant between the parts, the Brit Bin HaBetarim, which is a very, very mystical, very confusing incident that it requires quite a bit of talk, but we'll mention just a little bit, just to whet our appetites. And then last but not least, what happens in the parsha is that Avram is given the mitzvah of Brit Milah, which he continues with, which is the mark of the Jewish male and entry into the covenant Hashem. All right, so that's that's the parsha basically in a nutshell. And for the sake of time, we'll try to focus on just a few psukim here and there. I'll try to go in order as best I can. So let's get right into our sources. I'm going to share my screen for those of you who are following on Zoom. Sorry for you on Facebook world. I apologize, but the sheet is available on Safaria. And if you need help getting there, just send me an email. I'll be happy to help you get there. All right, so here we go. Very first pasuk. Vayomer Hashem el Avram. Hashem said to Avram, that was Avraham's name before it was changed to Avraham, is Avram. Lech Lecha, go for yourself. That's best translation I can think of for now. Me artzecha, from your land, umi moladetcha, and from your birthplace, umi beit avicha, and from your father's house, el eretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. So he wasn't given directions of where to go, and he didn't know he would be going to Eretz Israel. According to Rav Hirsch, this whole pasuk is basically Hashem telling Avram that I will show you a sign when you get to the right place. You're going to travel and go. And so Avram didn't know he was going to go to a place he wanted to go to. And he wanted to go to Eretz Israel. Who wouldn't? It's a blessed land. There's holy people there. But he didn't know he was going there. But he went in that direction. He didn't know that it would be the right place for sure. But Hashem would show him a sign, and Hashem did. He showed him the sign by speaking to him when he came to the right place. But as one of the themes that have been pretty consistent in our classes is that the Torah is not just a book of verses, a book of stories. There's a lot hidden there, a lot of codes, and one of the codes is in gematria. Gematria is an ancient way of figuring out extra messages in the Torah. Sometimes extra, sometimes they just edify a certain message, sort of like make it more concrete. And one of the masters of gematria was the Baal HaTurim, who wrote also the Tur, the compendium of Jewish law that is sort of the basis, at least in conceptually in its format, the basis of the Shulchan Aruch, that follows the exact same format of how to list halakha, which is what the Jewish people live by. So it's a significant work. So the Baal HaTurim on this pasuk says several things, but one of them is Lech Lecha. Now gematria is rather easy to do sometimes. Lamed is 30. Huf is 20. 30 plus 20 is 50. Another time, and it's 100. So it's a significant. It seems like an important number. It's 100. Lech Lecha. And the Baal HaTurim does not miss his opportunity to tell you a few things about this particular gematria. Lech Lecha, remez lo kishetihia ben lecha Lech Lecha shanim as yaschel legoy gadol. So he was promised that he's going to become, the next pasuk, Hashem promises him that he's going to be a great nation. But to be a great nation, you need to start having children. He's not going to have children for a long time. By the way, at this point, he's 75 years old. So here, he says, the Baal HaTurim says that it's a remez, 100 is a remez to the age that he's going to be when he first is about to have children, which is the son Yitzchak. In next week's parsha, that's when he's going to begin to become a goy gadol. Shenolad lo Yitzchak. So the fact that he's going to be a father of a nation is hinted to already in Lech Lecha. When you are Lech Lecha, when you are that age, when you are 100, that's when that's going to happen. So that's 25 years from when he was first speaking to him at this point. Divrei acher, devar acher. So Dalet Aleph stands for another opinion. Remez lo shel acher shetalech me'artzecha tichia kiminim lech lecha. So another hint is that he's going to have 100 more years left to his life. Now he's 75 years old now. He dies at 175. So exactly Lech Lecha years are left to him. Sharei ben Ayin Hey Shana Yeh Kishayetzel L'chol Shanotav Kuf Ayin Hey. So his whole life is going to be 175. He's 75 years old. Starts off the Balaturim already with a gematria. 100 Lech Lecha stands for two things. Already there's depth in the Torah, even though you can do the math. The Torah is going to tell us in Parshat Chayei Sarah how old Avram was when he died. So it's 175. This is not a big chidush, but the fact that he's 75 now, and that can be worked out mathematically quite easily. Rashi does that for us. And the fact that at 100 years, it's 25 years later from this point is when he's going to begin to when he's going to have a child. All of that is also in the Torah. Obviously, Yitzchak's birth is in the Torah. But the Bible wants us to know that there's here a hint to all of that. So the whole story is already encapsulated in the very first words that are used to introduce the story. So that's I just wanted to start off the class with I just want everybody to have an appreciation of how deep the Torah is. The Torah is not just stories, not just lessons, not just halachot. There's a lot to learn from it. By the way, gematria is nothing to poo-poo about. The Gemara sometimes learns out entire halachot from hints in the gematria. We'll have other gematrias, God willing, in future classes. But this is a very simple gematria, Lech Lecha. You don't have to do do any kind of gematria acrobatics to figure this out. 30 plus 20 plus 30 plus 20, 100. Beautiful. Okay, nice even number. Okay, we're going to skip along to a few psukim to pasuk Daled, Yud Bet Daled, 12:4. So there it says. This is after the command that Hashem gave him, Lech Lecha Ma'artzecha, etc., etc. So what does Avraham do? Immediately, Vayelech Avram kasher diber elav Hashem. Avram went forth just as Hashem commanded him. Vayelech ito Lot, and with him came Lot. A lot of rabbis make a big deal about the interesting language here. Vayelech ito, Lot went with him. Does that mean he went on his own? Does that mean he was compelled to go with him? Did he go because he believed in Avram's mission, etc., etc.? Ben chamesh shanim v'shivim shana b'tzeto me Haran. There you have it. He was 75 years old when he left Haran. Okay, very simple. Now, 75 years old. We just talked about that with the Balaturim. Why is that important? Why is it significant that he was 75 years old? So it happens to be, I don't have the source with me here, but Rabbi Avigdor Nebensal, who's the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivat HaKotel, has several Sfarim on the Torah. One of them is called Sichut al Sefer Bereshit, where he talks about Sefer Bereshit. And so he mentions that there seems to be an argument amongst many authorities about how old Avram was when he discovered Hashem. Now we know, you've probably heard before, that there is a midrash that tells us that Avram was 3 years old when he discovered Hashem. 3 years old. So he, of course, you've probably heard the story. He was hidden in a cave because the king Nimrod had a dream, some sort of prophecy, or stargazers told him that Avram would cause him trouble. So he wanted to have him killed. He would have had him killed, but Terach and his wife hid him away in the cave. And when he was 3 years old, he came out of the cave. And he looked at the sun and he thought the sun was God, and he started praying to it. But then, of course, came sunset. It was maybe it was daylight savings. The sunset happened quite early, and then Avram said, "Okay, so that can't be God. God can't not exist sometimes and exist other times. That doesn't make sense." So then he said, "Oh, the moon. The moon must have conquered the sun. Ah, got it." So he starts praying to the moon. What happens? The moon, it becomes daytime. It's dawn, and it's the moon disappears. The sun rises. Ah, what happened? The sun that's not a god conquered the moon that I thought was God. So must be whatever is God has to be the God of both of these. So that's how some midrashim explain how old or how Avram discovered Hashem. So that's very nice. In fact, there's actually, speaking of gematria, happens to be a very interesting gematria in Bereshit 26:5, where the word ekev is used in reference to Avram, and ekev is the gematria of 172. So those are the years that he followed Hashem. Wait a minute, 172? He was 175 when he died. So why is it 172? Because if you subtract 172 from his total life, which is 175, you have the 3 years that he didn't follow Hashem, because he was 3 when he started following Hashem. That's a cute little gematria. But there's more. There's other opinions. The Rambam in the beginning of Hilchot Avodat Kochavim, very important Rambam. He does a very unusual thing, the Rambam. He doesn't usually cite history, and he usually only does it when there's some sort of significant historical aspect to halacha, or somehow the history affects the halacha. So this is a book of law, his halachot, his Mishnah Torah, the Yad HaChazaka. So why is Rambam quoting history? He does this maybe 3 or 4 times in the beginning of Hilchot Ishut. He talks about the history of marriage in Torah. So in Avodat Kochavim, in the very beginning, he talks about how people started following idols. Why do people worship idols? So he talks about this whole history of people mistaking again the sun for a god, they knew that God created the world, and they knew God created powerful things, powerful aspects of creation. So they thought if we worship this aspect of creation, we're worshiping God, indirectly. And eventually, over time, that became, well, let's just worship this thing directly. Must be a very powerful thing. So that's how Avodah Zarah, according to the Rambam, began. So, but according to that, Rambam says that Avram was 40 when he discovered Hashem. 40? That's not 3. That's 40. It's a completely different number. But wait, there's more. Tosfot on Shabbat 6b. So Tosfot there say that Avram was 75 years old when he discovered Hashem, which makes sense with 75 because this is our parsha here. He says he was 75 when Hashem first spoke to him. What's going on? How come we're having all these different opinions about how old Avram was? Why are we getting these different numbers? Is one right and the other one's wrong? So the job, as I've mentioned in previous classes, the job of today's Talmid Chacham is to find some sort of balance where all the opinions are correct. Elu ve'elu, this opinion and that opinion is correct. He was 3, he was 40, and he was 75. How's that possible? So writes Rav Avigdor Nemetzal. Beautiful. He says, we know, and we have to understand this is crucial to our Avodat Hashem. We know that closeness to Hashem is a step-by-step process. It has to be. It has to be. You can't just jump rungs that aren't for you yet. You need to listen to Hashem, and you need to trust in Him, and it needs to be a step-by-step process. It can't be just jumping right in to do whatever you want. The Yetzer Hara. I actually heard this recently from Rav Eliyahu, famous Kabbalist. So he writes that the Yetzer Hara, one of the tricks of the Yetzer Hara, is to try to convince people to do things that they're not ready for, to jump in to you just started learning how to read Hebrew. Say Tikkun Chatzot. Go ahead, start saying Tikkun Chatzot. So Tikkun Chatzot is a prayer that people say in the middle of the night where they sit on the floor and cry over Yerushalayim. That's not for everybody at this point in history. If you're really feeling it, if it's in your heart to cry over Yerushalayim, by all means, and you have time and you have the emotional wherewithal to do it, Go ahead and do it. But it's not for everybody. It's probably not for most people even nowadays. We're so insensitive that most people are just not there. And to jump there and you just learn Hebrew, and it's going to be very disruptive, very distracting. You're going to feel like you're never done davening. You're going to be reading the Siddur from morning to night and then into midnight. It's going to be a very difficult life, and people. That's how the Yetzer Hara convinces people to drop out altogether. So that's not how we do things. We have to everything. Closeness to Hashem is a step-by-step process. There's a beautiful story I heard from Rav Shalom Rosner. Beautiful story about one of the Gaonim. There's in our history there was a group of people called the Gaonim. This is a little bit after the Talmud was written. One of the famous ones was Rav Saadia Gaon. He was once. Without going into too much detail, a student came. Why am I sharing the screen now? A student came and saw him very ecstatic. The Rav Saadia Gaon was jumping for joy, dancing around. I'm not really sure how he showed his enthusiasm, but he was much more happy than he usually is. And the student said, Rav Saadia, why are you so happy? What happened? So Rav Saadia Gaon said, I need to tell you the story. What happened was I was staying at an inn, and the innkeeper did not recognize me, and he treated me well. It was a nice inn, good food, nice comfortable bed. Everything was fine. And then what happened was suddenly, as I was leaving, somebody else at the inn recognized me and said, Rav Saadia Gaon, please give me a bracha, etc., however they treated their gedolim in the time. And the innkeeper just blanched. He turned pale. He says, I didn't know you were Rav Saadia Gaon. He says, so what's the difference? You didn't know who I was. It's okay, I'll give you a bracha. Don't be sad. He says, no, but if I would have known who you were, I would have given you the normal good treatment. I would have given you the VIP treatment, the best treatment, the world championship treatment, the LA Dodgers treatment right now. Right? I'll give you the best. You wouldn't be just a regular customer. You'd be in the best suite. So Saadia Gaon said, "You realize what this means?" He says, not to a student. He said, no. The student said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "We are like that too when it comes to Hashem. At some stages, we treat him the best we can. But when we realize what Hashem is, when we really realize what He's done for us, how much more is our relationship, how much closer we can become to Hashem, that's when we give Him the VIP treatment." That's exactly what Rav Nebenzahl says about Avraham. He gave Hashem, he recognized Hashem at 3. He recognized Him even more at 40. And at 75. Wow. The treatment that Avram gave Hashem when Avram became 75, that was VIP treatment. That deserved for Hashem to speak to Avram in the prophecy already. That's what all these numbers mean. 3, 40, 75. These are not a contradiction. They're all different levels of recognition of Hashem that Avram experienced at different stages of his life. And of course, with the story of Rav Saadia Gaon, I think we can see the relevance to our own lives. We too recognize Hashem differently at different stages of our life. And God willing, the idea really is that it's supposed to be a growing process. This year's Parshat Lech Lecha should not be like last year's Parshat Lech Lecha. This Shabbat should not be like last Shabbat. It should be greater. Every Shabbat should be a constant, greater and greater experience, as our lives should be on a consistent basis. All right, let's go further in the Parsha. I'm going to share my screen again, if I can. There we go. And there we are. So we're going to skip to the next parak already. Parak Yud Gimel Pasuk Tet Zayin 13:16. So it says there Hashem is giving Avram a blessing, and part of the blessing is, and you've probably heard this before, V'simte et zaracha ka'afar haaretz asher lo yuchal ish limnot et efer haaretz gam zaracha yimaneh. says, Hashem tells Avram, I'll make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if one could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring too can be counted. Very awkward sentence, no? Uh, what are we talking about here? Are we counting people? We're not counting people. You can count the dust. You can't count what's happening here. So first of all, Rav Hirsch tells us, I don't have the source here, but Rav Hirsch tells us a very important thing. We're not talking about numbers, first of all. We're not talking about that's how many Jews there will be in the population. That's impossible. That's the dust is immeasurable, uncountable. But that's what the pasuk actually says, right? It doesn't. It says that if you could count it, you could count your offspring, which is the Jewish people. What's going on here? So again, as we said when we began, there's codes and secrets in the Torah and hints to other ideas. So this the Chomat Anoch uses this as a hint to a famous halacha that you probably know. We know that the halacha tells us we're not supposed to count Jewish people. One of the reasons we're not supposed to count Jewish people is because it can cause a plague. This has happened in the time of David HaMelech. He had a census. This is the year 2020. So we are having, in America, we're having a census. Every 10 years we have a census. But in terms of counting Jewish people, we're not supposed to count Jewish people. We're supposed to find some other way to do it. Count noses, count heads, count yarmulkes, count psukim. Yeah, right. If you say the bracha of Al Nitilat Yadayim, that's 10 words. So if you say that bracha, whatever. So there's all kinds of ways to count to 10. If you're looking for a minyan, God willing, we will someday have minyanim again and be able to count to 10 and then some. But the Chomat Anoch uses this pasuk as proof to that idea. It's something called Sefer Tevot. So the last letter of each word, just like an acronym in English, right? Just like an acronym in English is the first letters of a word, right? Like SCUBA is an acronym for self-contained underwater breathing apparatus. FBI is an acronym for Federal Bureau of Investigation. So too, in Hebrew, the different phrases are also Rosh Tevot, and the end letters can spell out, using the Sefer Tevot, the end letters, you could also spell out things. So says the Chomat Anoch, Gam Zarecha Yemane, also your descendants will be counted. So Gam ends with Mem, Zarecha ends with Chaf, Yemane ends with Hey. Right? Mem, Chaf, Hey is what? Sefer Tevot says the Chomat Anoch, Sefer Tevot Maka, which means plague. The im yimnu yeh maka bahem. If you count them, there will be a plague. He quotes this from the Rabbeinu Ephraim, who did a lot of work with Gematriot and Sefer Tevot, Rosh Tevot as well, as did the Baal HaTurim and later on the Rokeach, etc. A lot of I don't know about later on, but definitely a lot of interesting concepts. So again, we know this is a halacha, and it's definitely in Torah Shabbal Peh. But here we have a hint to the matter in the pasuk itself, which explains the very awkward nature of the pasuk. Again, the pasuk says, "I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth," so that if one could theoretically count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Just say, "I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth," which is not countable. There's a lot more lo yachol yiman or something like that. But this whole phrase otherwise seems much more awkward, much more in detail than would ordinarily be necessary. Okay. So that's one of the blessings to Avram, is that his descendants would become a great nation. He himself would be a goy, there would be a gedula, a greatness to his zarecha, to his offspring, and that's one of the things that he's promised. Okay, so before we go on to the next piece, I like to pause every once in a while to see if there's any questions so far. Okay. Right. Then let's get right into the next piece. The next piece is already right before Avram gets involved with the war, the huge war of 4 kings versus 5 kings, and we're not talking about just the small tribal stuff. We're talking about, this was an international war, basically equivalent to a world war at the time, and Avram is unaffected, and he stays out of it and is not involved until Pasuk Yudalad Gimel tells us that V'yavo hapalit, the fugitive, came V'yagid Avram ha'ivri, and he told what's going on to Avram ha'ivri, to Avram the Ivri. Ivri has a lot of translations, but it has something to do with being over, being across, being away from everything else. We know that Avraham rejected the other cultures of the world. See, it's one of my favorite topics to really go off on, so I don't know if I should do it now, but maybe if there's time later. But a lot of people who want to rebel now against society, against their parents, against the current mode, what are they, in rebelling, what do they go to? They go to the world before Judaism, the world before Avram, which is not a rebellion. It's going back to an ancient tradition, a much more ancient tradition. Avram was unique. Avram was a chidush. Avram was an amazing leader, but he was what the things he accomplished. The millions of people who are alive today, who are positively influenced by Avram's faith and his teachings and his treatment of people, that is unbelievable. So this Palit, this fugitive, comes to Avram the Ivri, and it says where he lived. He lives over by Mamre. He had friends, Eshkol, Anar. So anyway, so here's the Palit. Says Rashi. Again, Rashi is amazing. Rashi is beautiful. We need to try to understand how we'll never ever really reach the point where we totally understand everything Rashi was thinking, but that's the job of a Talmid Chacham nowadays, is to try to make sense for us why Rashi says what he says. So here's a great example. Says Rashi, and we have it here in Hebrew and English in the source sheet. It says V'yavo hapalit. This lefi pshuto ze og. According to the simple explanation, this was Og. That's the simple explanation, that this was Og, the giant, who we only call by name in Bamidbar, when he's a giant that Moshe is afraid of battling on his way to bring the Jews to Eretz Yisrael. So that's the simple explanation, that it's Og. Why? Shepalit min hamilchama. He escaped the war. He's a palit is somebody who's polit, who escapes. He's an escapee. He's a refugee. Who else could be the refugee? Right? So it has to be Og. Hu dechatuv, as it says in the pasuk, kirak Og nishar mieter harifaim. It says in Devarim, it calls Og the remainder of the Rephaim, one of the last people who was left of the Rephaim. So Zehu Nishar. And this is what it means, that he was left over. Shalosha Haruguhu Imrafil Chavero Shehikur Harafayim Ashdod Karnaim. So these kings killed off the rest of the Raphaim in Ashdod Karnaim, and so Og's a leftover. So that's what it means. He escaped. That's why it's Pashut Pshat. This is Og. Says the Tanchuma. Tanchuma says a different explanation for this one. Tanchuma b'midrash Brishut Rabbah Zeh Og. Sorry, not a different explanation. So Tanchuma and the midrash Brishut Rabbah also say this is Og. Shepalit midor hamabul. What did he escape? He escaped the generation of the flood. V'zehu miyet harfaim, and that's how he's. And that's what it means. He's left over from the Rephaim. Shenemar hanefilim hayu ba'aretz. The pasuk says in Bereshit before the flood that there was something called nefilim, those who fell, which let's translate that as giants. So of those giants, hayu ba'aretz that lived in the land, they were all killed out. Shehareg, Keva, Shehareg, Avram, Visa, et Sarah. So there were giants, and he escaped the flood. So of all the giants, they all died out, but only Og remained, or Og escaped these kings. Either way, it's Pashut Pshat that when it says Ha Palit, which means the refugee, as if we know one, as if there's a previous pasuk somewhere that calls somebody a Palit, so we should for sure know that has to be Og. No, not the case. Rashi tells us this is Og. Because why was he doing this? He was doing this because he wanted Avram to be killed so he himself could marry Sarah. That's what it says. Interestingly, it calls her Sarah and him Avram, even though it's Avraham and Sarah or Avram and Sarai. I'm not going to get into that right now. But what is interesting is that this is not the only midrash. Rashi, of course, again, as has been mentioned earlier. Definitely, we spoke quite a bit about it in the last class. Rashi is more than anything else an editor, a brilliant editor who keeps some things and takes out other things and quotes certain sources to get a consistent Pashut Pshat level, simple, supposedly understanding of the Torah. So if that's Rashi's opinion, so that's the one he's going to use. Now, what's really interesting is that there are other opinions that Rashi did not quote. One of them is in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, which is another book of Midrashim. And over there, what's quoted here, very beginning of quote here, it says, V'avo Michael lahagid Avraham. This Palit, this refugee, is none other than Michael, the top angel in Hashem's court. And he told Avram, how do we know that means? So Shenemar ve'avo palit v'yagid la'Avram ha'ivri. So he's the one who told Avram, the Jew, about, or the Ivri, the Hebrew. He's the one who told him about this war with Lot, that Lot needed saving. So, which one was it? Was it Michael, the archangel, the Malach, the great one? And the Midrash, by the way, goes on to say, why is he called Palit here, the escapee? Because in the hour when Hashem, blessed is He, caused when there's this whole sort of struggle that was happening in heaven. Again, this is all midrashic, so let's take it on face value. With a grain of salt here, as perhaps we're talking more metaphorically. So at some point, there was a struggle going on in heaven, and Hashem, in order not to lose Michael, he grabbed his wings. So that's saving him. Made him turned him into the one who escaped. And by the way, also the Midrash then continues to say that in the pasuk in Yecheskel, where it says that Yecheskel said Ba alai hapalid Yerushalayim, that somebody who escaped Yerushalayim came to him So that's also a reference to Michael. So, question: who are we talking about here? Is this Michael or is this Og? So, writes Rav Zalman Soroskin in Aznaim LaTorah. Here I have the translation called what's it called? Torah Insights, I think it's called. So he says it was Og who escaped from the war. By the way, just to throw a whole monkey wrench in here, I've asked this trivia question in the past, and it's actually a very good one. I'm going to give you something to think about. I'm not going to give you the answer, certainly not today, but it's an interesting question. We learn later, Chazal tell us that Og had a twin brother. Assuming that this is a literal twin brother, his name was Sichon, right? We know Chazal didn't tell us about Sichon. The Torah tells us about Sichon. Sichon is also a king that the Jewish people encounter around the same time that they encounter Og, and Sichon, according to Chazal, was Og's twin brother. Problem: how was Og a palit? Rashi just told us one of the ways he was a palit is that he escaped, he survived the flood. How did he survive the flood? So the Midrash tells us he was holding on to Noach's teva. Okay, and he was the only survivor. Great. What happened to his twin brother? In other words, later on in the story, when the Jewish people are about to enter Eretz Israel, there's Og to fight and there's Sichon to fight, who's Og's twin brother. And if he is indeed literally his twin brother, we have a problem explaining how he survived the flood. Because twin brothers, you can't have a twin brother. You can't have a twin brother who survived with you if you're the only survivor. Okay.
What if he, like, I don't know, do you think he could have been on his shoulders?
On his shoulders? Okay.
Also, what happened to the feet
The feet?
of Og?
The feet of
Like
Og.
he held on to the water. I mean, to the teva, but then his feet are in the water. Wasn't it like hot water?
I mean, yes, it was definitely hot water. The whole teva wasn't always above the water.
What?
It was supposed to be, but it was sometimes submerged while it was still raining, at least. Right? It wasn't dry on top of the teva. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So there's it wouldn't just be his feet. Let's say they got burned. Let's say they got mutilated. I don't know. It's all very interesting questions. I don't know. Well, I have an answer, but I'd rather you guys think about it or try to look it up. You have a week to come back. That's your homework assignment. Okay, let's get back.
I have too many homework assignments. Don't give me another one.
Yeah, but this is one you can do on Shabbat without having to worry about it or anything.
True statement.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, Rav Soroskin quotes this Rashi, as we did, that this is Og, and then he quotes this Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, that is the angel Michael, and then he says a beautiful thing, and this is really what I wanted to focus on. And this is, again, this shows the brilliance of Rashi, that he chooses what he does and leaves out what he does. All of this creates a beautiful. The more commentaries you see, the more. What's a good word for it? The more dimensional the Torah becomes. So he continues. He says, Chazal's words serve as further clear evidence that, quote, man sees only the surface, quote from Shmuel Aleph. We have only the fact. A fugitive reports to Avram that his relative has been taken captive. It is impossible to tell whether the fugitive was Michael, the great prince, the celestial Kohen Gadol who brings offerings on the heavenly altar, or Og, who even when in fear of his life does not hesitate to plot against Avram so that he could fall in war, enabling Og to marry the most beautiful women, Avram's wife Sarah. So unable are we to gauge human behavior that we cannot say whether something was done by the greatest angel in heaven or the greatest scoundrel on earth. This teaches us to judge every person favorably. And even Og, whose intentions were definitely evil, was rewarded for notifying Avram. He continues, but isn't that an amazing thought? Isn't that beautiful? We have no idea whether we're talking about Michael or Og when we say Hapolit. We just don't know if it was the greatest person or the worst person. Sometimes the worst person in the world does the greatest thing, and we don't know. Right? Lot was saved. Avraham gets the bracha from Malkitzedek, as we're going to see in the next piece we're going to look at. A lot of great things happened, all because of this report from possibly Og. So great was this event that it's equal to something that Michael would have done, that the angel would have done. That's how this, by the way, doesn't have to be a contradiction in terms, because Michael does not usually act outright. He doesn't just come and do things literally. Right? He inspires somebody to do it. He could have been the inspiration that caused Og to come to Avram and to say this. There are other ways that Og could have killed Avram to take Sarah, right? Or Sarai at this point. So using this particular method might have been inspired by Michael. Okay, we have about a little less than 15 minutes left. We have 3 more pieces that I'd like to get to today, if possible. So we're going to skip to the next parak. So the war is over. Avram is victorious. The king of Sodom is happy to give him a reward. Avram says, no, thank you. I have enough. And then comes out Malkitzedek. Malkitzedek says beautiful words. And of course, as I mentioned before, Chazal tell us that Malkitzedek was Shem, the son of Noach, who, by the way, saw the flood, right? He lived in the Teva. Not only that, but even though he was 10 generations away from Avram, he knew people who knew Avram. Take that. He was 10 generations after Adam Rishon, the first man who saw the world created. Well, sort of. Right? So who spoke to God. So Shem knew people who spoke to Adam. So and now Shem is speaking with Avram. So Avram is speaking to somebody who spoke to the first person. So even though this is almost 2,000 years in history, these generations lived a long time, and for whether it was miraculous or whether the environment was healthier back then, the important thing for us is that they lived in this time together, and that allowed them to communicate. And that's why it's important that they lived such long lives. So says the pasuk. The pasuk says this bracha from Malkitzedek. He says, "V'yivarachehu v'yomer." He blessed him and he said, "Baruch Avram lakel elyon koneh shamayim va'aretz." Blessed is Avram to Hashem, the great Elyon, the greatest of all, Koneh shamayim va'aretz, the creator of heaven and earth. Now, there's a lot to talk about here. This blessing from Malkitzedek is very important. Chazal tell us that this was the transfer of kahuna from Malkitzedek, who's called a Kohen. So it's a transfer of kahuna from him to Avram. Then Avram transferred the kahuna, this ability to be a priest, of Hashem. Avram transferred this to Yitzchak. Yitzchak transferred this to Yaakov. And Yaakov transferred it to his son Levi, and eventually, of all the Leviim, the tribe of Cohen, the power of being a Cohen was given to a particular family in Cohen. That's Aaron and his sons. And then anybody who's a descendant of Aaron is a Cohen. So that and then, in a sense, all the Jewish people are supposed to be a nation of Kohanim. But let's leave that aside for now. The importance of this blessing that he gives them is great. Amongst other things, it's not here in the Malbim, but amongst other things is this idea of Konei Shamayim Va'aretz, that Hashem is the Konei, is the creator, the owner of the heavens and the earth. Now, of all people to say that, it's Shem, right? The person who saw the flood, the person who saw that Hashem has a direct involvement in human life. And he's giving this blessing to Avram because he sees that Avram was miraculously successful in fighting all of the kings of the world all at once with a tiny army of 300 some people, or if, or according to Chazal, if it's literal, all by himself, virtually, him and his servant Eliezer. So whatever that means, certainly it was miraculous. And so now that Shem is reminded of, oh, this is the person who's going to bring this knowledge of the world to the people, that Hashem is in the heavens and the earth, not just in the heavens. He created the world and he spun it on its axis, and there it goes, and Hashem is not involved. Chas v'shalom. Hashem is very involved in everybody's personal secret lives. That's why Hashem cares about what we eat and what we do and what we do in private. All of that matters to Hashem because he's involved. It's not just some disconnected deity that just is watching us from afar. It's very connected, very important, and that's what that's the message that Avram is going to bring to the world. Now, what does it mean to give a bracha to somebody? That's what the Malbim is interested in finding out. What does it mean? V'yivarchehu, and he blessed him. How do you bless somebody? What does it mean to bless somebody? And here's I want to just to strengthen the question, just so you understand where the Malbim is coming from. Hashem decides what happens in the world, right? Hashem's not going to change his mind. The plan he had is the plan he'll always have. If there's a change, it's because he wanted there to be a change. So what does that mean, v'yivarachehu? Hashem knows everything. And if he knows everything, then he'll know if somebody should be blessed or not. You don't need to bless anybody, because Hashem will take care of that. You don't need to say, let's say you want to give somebody a bracha that they should have financial success. Guess what? Hashem will give them a blessing of financial success if Hashem wants them to have that. Or if he doesn't want them to have that, he won't give it to them. It doesn't matter what you say. So what's the point of giving a bracha at all? It's almost the same question that I think Sandra asked last time, or maybe it was somebody else asked last time, about what's the point of praying at all? So here's the Malbim's answer. We have the source number 12 here. V'yivarchehu v'yomer baruch Avram l'kel elyon. Hudia b'zeh sheyesh Hashem kel elyon. So we know from this, from these words, that Hashem is the Most High. V'hu savod elokeh elokim v'lo zot levad ki hu koneh shamayim v'aretz. And that's not all. Not only he's the greatest of all powerful beings. There could be powerful kings and anything else. Spirits. Hashem is the most powerful of all of them. Now, that's not all. Koneh shamayim va'aretz. Sha'shamayim va'aretz hem kinyano. They belong to him. Sha'kinyan hu birshut hakoneh. When somebody owns something, it's in their possession. The earth is in Hashem's possession. V'ein moshel alav zulato. And there's no other ruler beside Hashem in how the world works. Kein hu amanig hanhaga halyona shel marechet v'af haga hatachtona shel haaretz. There's what's going on in heaven and there's what's going on earth. V'lo shekana shamayim v'aretz ba'avur be'et habriya rak kona tamid. He's the constant ruler of the world. Constantly making the world over and over again. Every second, our atoms are being disconnected and reconnected, dying and being regenerated all over again. And he's constantly supervising over everything. Muflat b'chol rega, every single moment. V'kol zeh b'vor mamashe baruch Avram, and this is all clear in what he blessed Avram with. Mashe Avraham, who mekabel bracha ito, just as Avram accepted the blessing from him. V'asa imo nisim l'mala min hateva al yedei birchat Hashem alav, and he expanded the channel through which Hashem brings his blessing to the world. Again, this is exactly what I've been saying in an earlier class. Hashem gives everybody a shefa. There's a radiation of goodness and blessing coming from Hashem. You can close that up. You can close that channel. You can close up. You can make something tame. That's what tuma means. It's a covering over of that channel. It's constricting the pipeline of Hashem's blessing. You could do that, or you can expand that channel, and that's exactly what a bracha does. A bracha allows, if it's given sincerely and given from a good person, that blessing can expand the blessing that Hashem already radiates to people. Hashem is like not affected in any way, right? His blessing is going to be constantly being given out. Radiation is constantly going. What he does gain is that he's gaining the means through which to express his chesed to the world. That's what Hashem receives, so to speak, from good deeds, from mitzvot. This expanding of this channel. Okay, we have two more psukim. I'd like to try to get as much as we can out of them. Some of them are rather deep. One is a controversial issue. V'tomer Sarai el Avram, Chamasi alecha anuchi natati shivchati v'chakecha v'tera ki harata v'ekal be'inaha yishpat Hashem be'inei uve'inacha. Hashem said to Avram, she blames on Avram the fact that Hagar does not treat Sarai, her owner, really, her mistress. She doesn't treat her with good respect as soon as she became pregnant, and Sarai could not become pregnant. So Sarai treats her poorly, and we have to understand how that's possible when Sarai is such a good person. And the answer is, I'm not going to go through this whole thing right now. But if when you have a chance, you could read through it. This is from Nechama Leibowitz. She quotes the Ramban, and the Radak, who say that a great person's mistake resonates with great repercussions for the future. The fact that Hagar's descendants are so powerful, in other words, Yishmael and the Arab people have so much power financially and economically, and in terms of the control of regions, and this is, of course, this has been true since the Ottoman Empire, and then probably before that, the fact that they have so much power and are so influential in the world. Just look at the regents of the University of California system. So the fact that they have so much power is a repercussion, is an effect, is really kind of like a punishment for Sarah's behavior. So it says Nechama Leibowitz in beautiful language, and of course this is a translation from the Hebrew. Perhaps the Torah wished to teach us that before man undertakes a mission that will tax all his moral and spiritual powers, he should ask himself first whether he can maintain those same high standards to the bitter end. Otherwise, man is liable to descend from the pinnacle of altruism and selflessness into much deeper depths that would ordinarily have been the case. So basically, she quotes also the Ramban. Such people possess neither the prudence nor the direction to consider for a moment the possibility that they might not be able to fulfill all these obligations. They imagine that the good intention which they harbored at the time of the vow would be reckoned in their favor. So people who make vows and don't keep them is basically equal to Sarah's character, who was a good person, but she didn't fulfill her entire potential of kindness when it came to Hagar. It looks like the next pasuk that we're going to learn we're going to have to get to in maybe, God willing, next year. It's a very complex Rashi and complex pasuk. Really, it's talking about this. Really, we're giving physical attributions to Hashem. That Hashem, after he spoke to Avram, he left from on top of him. What is that talking about? Why is he on top of him? Why is it? And Rashi said it would be disrespectful to say otherwise. And all of that requires quite a bit of commentary that, unfortunately, we don't have time for today. But that's it. We have quite a bit to think about as we get into Shabbat. I just want to end with just a few important announcements. Next week's class, Parsha class, has a sponsor. I'll mention the names and everything in the announcements coming out, God willing, tomorrow night. But meanwhile, just so you know, we haven't had a class sponsored in quite a while, and sponsorship opportunities are available. It's still available even for next Monday night's class on Shlomo Karlbach, which is semi-kumzitz, semi-class. Torah and biography and a little bit of music, and should be an exciting class. Invite your friends. It is next Monday night is his yard site, 26th yard site. So that's those are some of the announcements. Also, if there's anybody you can help pressure to come to shul this Shabbat, please do. We did not have a minyan this Shabbat, unfortunately, for the first time in quite a while, and we really need some help. If you know anybody who can come, we're having services at 8 a.m. now, not 7:30, all the way at 8 a.m. for Shachrit, and we will also have Mincha Marav, even though we will probably not have a minyan for Mincha Marav, but at least we'll have a class in between, a good way to spend Shabbat together. Anyway, whether there's a minyan or not, Shabbat is a holy time. And just like Avraham grew in his connection with Hashem when he was 30 and 40 and 75, so too we at our ages, whatever ages we are, whether we're 3 years old or 40 years old, 75 years old, older, younger, it doesn't matter. We all have an opportunity to grow and to become Hashem's servants on a new level every week. With that, I wish you a good night. If you have any questions, by all means, I'll